Hello and welcome to Business 360. I'm Shireen Bhan. The headlines we're tracking for you this evening. G20 leaders deplore the war in Ukraine, and the joint statement echoes Prime Minister Modi's words that this is not the era for war. Also says the use or threat of use of nuclear weapons is inadmissible. India takes over the G20 presidency from Indonesia and will host the high-profile gathering next year. 2 people killed after a missile hits a Polish village near the Ukrainian border. Russia denies that its missiles crossed into Poland. US President Biden says it's unlikely that the missile was fired from Russia after NATO and G7 leaders take stock of the situation in Bali. The Sensex and the Nifty ended a record closing high, even as volatile session ends with marginal gains. The Nifty Bank also hits a record high, but metal stocks under pressure. The revival of Jet Airways flies into more turbulence. Sources say lenders are likely to take a stand against the Jalan Kalrock consortium in court, saying the conditions for the takeover have not been met. CNBC-TV18 reported last week that the consortium is yet to make any payments to lenders to assume control of the airline. Income tax officials search premises linked to Metropolis across Delhi, Mumbai, Chennai and other cities amidst allegations of unaccounted wealth and concealed income. The top management is under the scanner as well. Petitioners withdraw pleas challenging the constitutional validity of online gambling ban. In Tamil Nadu, the state government tells the Madras High Court there would be no punitive action till the ordinance comes into effect.
We will make America glorious again. And we will make America great again.
Former U.S. President Donald Trump announces his 2024 presidential run. This comes a day after the Republican Party's less than impressive midterm election performance, with several candidates endorsed by Trump losing in the polls. Twitter's paid verification service to relaunch on the 29th of November. In a tweet, Elon Musk says that he's punting the relaunch to ensure that it is rock solid. And it's third time lucky for NASA's Artemis moon mission. The crewless capsule will make a 3-week voyage around the moon and return to Earth. Well, it's been a volatile day. We saw the Nifty and the Sensex finally closing the day flat with a slight positive bias. However, both the indices ending the day at record closing highs. Banks outperforming once again, and with that, the index has posted another record close. Mid-caps underperformed today, with the benchmark ending over 0.5% lower. Prashant is standing by to wrap up the day's trading action. Prashant, volatile, but nevertheless record closing high.
An absolutely flat session is what we had on the index, on the Nifty. There was a bit of selling pressure at 230 or so, but that was bought back and the market finally ended unchanged. Banks had a better session. The Bank Nifty, led by private banks mainly, did a little better than the Nifty, but not much. Mid-caps and small caps, those parts of the market sold off a little bit more, 0.5%, 0.75% in that range. On the Nifty, the gains were in names like Kotak, HDFC. Coal India reversed some of its losses from yesterday. The cuts came through in Adani Enterprises, Adani Ports, Apollo Hospitals and Tata Steel were the other 2 names which lost in trade. Broader markets, more declines than advances. And you had names like Apollo Tyres saw a big move yesterday on the upside, was down today. Metropolis, there was news flow. Paytm was down. You had SAIL, that Steel Authority, Indiabulls Housing, Delta Corp, Aarti Industries and Dredging Corporation, some of the other losers. Gainers in specific pockets. So the rail infra stocks were higher. Names like RVNL, IRFC, IRCON. The defense names like HAL, BDL and Mazgaon Dock were higher in trade. And some reversals after, the beatdowns that stocks like Campus Activewear, the footwear company, has seen. TCNS Brands on the back of a potential deal, and, a bunch of others as well. All in all, it was kind of mixed day with more declines than advances. 2 new listings today. So BKG made its debut, a household name really. Good debut. The stock, although, came off the day's high. Global Health, which runs the Medanta hospitals, that also listed, but that was stronger and actually moved even higher after what was a very strong listing. The market pace has kind of slowed down. Everyone is waiting for the day when we hit new highs on the Nifty. The Bank Nifty, of course, has been making those every day now. Back to you.
Yes, the bank Nifty touching new records every day. Prashant, many thanks for joining us. The big story today, the leaders of G20 nations wrapped up their summit in Bali with a joint declaration condemning the war in Ukraine. In a strong statement, the joint communique said the G20, and I quote, deplores Russia's aggression in Ukraine. Vladimir Putin, remember, did not attend the summit. Russia's foreign minister, who attended the event, was not present on the last day. Meanwhile, India has taken over the G20 presidency from Indonesia. Kiran Khatri wraps up what was an eventful G20 summit and previews the high-profile gathering that will take place in India next year.
G20 leaders in Bali woke up to news of an explosion in Poland which killed at least 2 people near the Ukraine border. US President Joe Biden called for an emergency meeting of G7 and NATO leaders on the sidelines of the summit. After the meeting, Biden said it was unlikely that the missile was fired by Russia.
Contest that. I don't want to say that till we completely investigate, but it's unlikely in the minds of the trajectory that it was fired from Russia, but we'll see.
The G20 joint declaration condemned the war in Ukraine in strong terms. The statement said it deplores in the strongest terms the aggression by the Russian Federation against Ukraine and demands its complete and unconditional withdrawal. The statement went on to say the use or threat of use of nuclear weapons is inadmissible, the peaceful resolution of conflicts, efforts to address crisis, as well as diplomacy and dialogue are vital. Today's era must not be of war. These words echoed what Prime Minister Modi said at the Shanghai Cooperation Summit in September.
India played a key role in the successful negotiations of the outcome document. Prime Minister's message that this is not the era of war and that the best way is to return to the path of dialogue and diplomacy to resolve the conflict resonated very deeply across all the delegations.
Post the final declaration, it was time for Indonesia to hand over the G20 presidency to India by passing the honorary gavel. India will hold a high-profile gathering next year. In the build-up, there will be 200 meetings across 32 different sectors, culminating in the summit on September 9th and 10th of 2023.
आज मैं ये आश्वासन देना चाहता हूं कि भारत की G20 अध्यक्षता इंक्लूसिव, एम्बिशियस, डिसिसिव और एक्शन ओरिएंटेड होगी। एक्सेलेंसी, अगले 1 साल में हमारा प्रयत्न रहेगा कि G20 नए विचारों की परिकल्पना के लिए और सामूहिक एक्शन को गति देने के लिए एक ग्लोबल प्राइम मूवर की तरह काम करे।
From sessions on health and digital transformation to bilateral meetings with world leaders, PM Modi had a packed schedule in Bali. He held bilateral talks with leaders of Germany, Italy, France, and the UK. The new British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak approved 3,000 work visas for Indian professionals after meeting Prime Minister Modi. However, there was no bilateral between Prime Minister Modi and China's President Xi Jinping. Both leaders came face-to-face at a dinner and exchanged pleasantries, but they have not held any bilateral talks since the clash between Indian and Chinese soldiers in Galwan Valley in May 2020. One of the highlights of the summit was the meeting between President Xi and President Biden, where they reached common ground in warning Russia over the use of nuclear weapons and agreeing to restart climate talks to cut emissions. President Biden also said he does not believe there's any imminent attempt by China to invade Taiwan. One leader who skipped the G20 summit was Russia's President Vladimir Putin. Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov did represent Russia in his place. However, he left the summit before the joint declaration condemning the Ukraine war was released. In Mumbai with Kiran Khatri, Arundhati Ramanan.
Well, as India takes over the G20 presidency, we're now joined by India's G20 Sherpa, Amitabh Kant. Mr. Kant, many thanks for joining us here on CNBC-TV18. I know this is a very busy day for you, and I suspect you're currently traveling from one location in Bali to another, so appreciate your time. First of all, congratulations and luck on taking over the G20 presidency, which comes India's way. I want to get you to give us the backstory of what really has transpired in the last 48 hours to ensure that there was a consensus on the G20 final communique. The draft did see plenty of back and forth, I'm given to understand, but finally there seems to have been a change, especially in the paragraph that addresses the Russia-Ukraine war. If you can share with us what went on in the last 48 hours.
Shireen, it was these were very complex and very tough negotiations because many countries were involved. There was total deadlock over the last 6 days. In the last 48 hours, India worked in partnership with all developing and emerging markets to ensure that we could build consensus around the para on geopolitics. The challenge of Russia-Ukraine war, breakdown of supply chains, many other issues were very, very complex and complicated. And the para, which was originally being drafted, was not a para, it was a very long statement, which was very one-sided. We felt, all of us felt that it should be instead of G20 getting into issues of security and war, etc., it's not essentially a forum for security. It's a forum for growth and progress, and therefore we should fall back on the UN resolution. So we had to work through 2 difficult nights to finally convince the G7 that we should go back to the UN resolution, pick up components of that, and really spell out the voting pattern as given in the UN resolution, and then conclude with what the Prime Minister Modi had said, that this is the age of diplomacy and dialogue, and this is not the era of war. Even this was objected to by some countries in our neighborhood, but we fought, and finally, I think all the emerging markets managed to stand together and convince all the G7 countries that G20 should stand united in this moment of crisis. And finally, everybody came together, and at the last minute,
Right. Mr. Kant, you're saying that there were objections and there was a lot of back and forth at the draft stage of the communique. But, I'm looking now at the final text, and several reports confirmed what you've just told us, that India, along with some other emerging nations, did manage to broker that consensus as far as the wording on the Russia-Ukraine war is concerned. The final text says there were other views and different assessments of the situation and sanctions, recognizing that the G20 is not the forum to resolve security issues. We acknowledge that security issues can have significant consequences for the global economy. Again, where did we find the support to ensure that the draft was changed and this was the final outcome? I would imagine that this required a lot of dialogue, a lot of diplomacy. Take me through what finally got us this breakthrough.
Yeah. So actually, India led the way, but I think a good thing was that Brazil, Argentina, Mexico, Saudi Arabia, Singapore, but even Turkey, all of them joined hands with us to say that we need an even balanced statement. It can't be condemnation all the way. There are various challenges. And we managed to convince G7 at the last minute that you can't have a statement which is totally political in nature. And therefore, our focus should be on growth. This is the moment when the world needs growth. This is the moment when the world needs progress on sustainable development goals.
Yes, and that clearly seems to have changed the draft to what we finally saw emerge in the text as far as the Russia-Ukraine paragraph is concerned. Mr. Kant, I now want to talk about some of the other aspects that the G20 has focused on. Then there are a whole host of issues, of course, from food security to climate change to cryptocurrencies. There are quite a lot of paragraphs in the statement that deal specifically with the issue of food security and the challenge that presents in the current scenario. The statement also talks about the pandemic fund, vaccines, etc. But I want to focus on food security because that has clearly gathered the attention of world leaders. It's been acknowledged as one of the biggest challenges that the world faces today. In that context, will there need to be a nuancing of India's position on food security? Because we did bring in export curbs, restrictions, bans, etc. In light of what the G20 communique now says, will there need to be a further nuancing?
So, there are 3 key issues. Food, fuel, and fertilizer came in a huge amount of discussion because it was felt that the food supply from both Russia and Ukraine, the food and the fertilizer supply from both these countries need to be totally unlocked. And therefore, as you read through the document, you will find that both the initiative taken by the Solidarity Lanes, as it's called, the initiative taken by Europe, all of them find a mention in the document, and that these need to be continued, extension needs to be provided, because unless and until you don't get food and fertilizer moving from the ports in Ukraine and Russia, and unless and until the present this is continued, the agreements are continued, extension is provided, you will feel a huge shortage. And if fertilizer is not provided, is adequately supplied, there will be a huge challenge in terms of productivity, agriculture production for the next year, and therefore the world will see a huge imbalance in demand and supply. And therefore you need to continue this. Actually, this was a subject of a full-day debate and discussion amongst G20. Therefore, a consensus was arrived at on this food and fertilizer issue, and even today, at the main meeting, the United Nations Secretary General, many leaders talked at length about the food and fertilizer issue. But this is really the key to ensuring that we are able to solve the problem of hunger, of poverty. Otherwise, a vast segment of the world will grow below poverty line without food. And therefore, there is a very clear consensus that these must be continued.
Yes, that the commitments made as far as ensuring food security are continued. Mr. Kant, I know that, we were going to have to get you back on a day that you have a little more time, perhaps when you're back in India, to talk in more detail on the road ahead as far as India's G20 presidency is concerned. But appreciate you joining us today and giving us a sense of what transpired, especially over the last 48 hours, to ensure that there was consensus on the draft that was finally issued as the final communique from the G20. Thanks very much for joining us. 2 people killed after a missile hit a Polish village near the Ukrainian border. Russia has denied that its missiles crossed into Poland. They've termed such reports, and I quote, as a deliberate provocation aimed at escalating the situation. US President Biden said it's unlikely that the missile was fired from Russia. Sanjay Suri gets us the latest from London. Russia denying that it had anything to do with this, and that now seems to be the view coming in from the US as well, Sanjay.
Some clear indications are emerging that this could have been a Ukrainian missile that landed in Poland, killing 2 people. We know from Polish authorities that this was a Russian-built missile, but Ukraine does deploy Russian-built missiles, principally the S-300 anti-missile system, and this anti-missile system was very actively deployed at that time. We know that about 90 missiles were fired from Russia into Ukraine, of which 70 were intercepted. So a lot of Ukrainian missiles were up there trying to get at these Russian missiles, and did so quite successfully in most of the cases. But it's very likely that one of these either malfunctioned or was diverted from its original trajectory and landed in Poland. Had this been a Russian missile, we certainly would have known by now from the evidence on the ground. Enough time has elapsed since this missile landed in Poland, and the markings would have been very telltale indications of where it came from. We are told by President Biden that it's unlikely that it was fired from Russia. President Duda of Poland says the evidence is inconclusive. Clearly, had the evidence pointed to Russia, we would have heard from NATO, we would have heard from Poland. It is very likely that they will now keep this position ambivalent, because it would be very awkward to point fingers publicly at Ukraine for a missile that landed lethally into Poland.
Sanjay Suri, appreciate you joining us. The other big international story, former US President Donald Trump has announced that he will run for the White House in 2024. The move comes just days after the midterm election results, where the Republicans underperformed and several candidates endorsed by Trump lost in the polls. Bree Jackson reports on Donald Trump's presidential run and its implications.
Trump made it official, launching a third bid for the White House. Now, all of this came during an event at his Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida. His 2024 White House bid comes just 2 years after he was ousted from the White House, and a week or more than a week after many of his handpicked candidates were defeated in the midterm elections. Now, in a wide-ranging speech, the former president talked about his time when he was in office and what a presidency would look like if he won in 2024. Take a listen.
I am running because I believe the world has not yet seen the true glory of what this nation can be. We have not reached that pinnacle, believe it or not. In fact, we can go very far. We're going to have to go far. First, we have to get out of this ditch. And once we're out, you'll see things that nobody imagined for any country.
Former President Trump has already filed the necessary paperwork to make it official that he's running in 2024. But he does face a series of investigations. That's into his business practices, handling of classified documents, and the attack on the U.S. Capitol. The former president says he will not let those investigations get in his way of running.
Well, Donald Trump announces his run for the White House in 2024. His daughter, Ivanka Trump, though, has issued a statement saying that she will not be involved in her father's political career in any form or fashion from here on. Time for us to head into a short break, but when we return, the revival of Jet Airways flies into turbulence. Sources say lenders are likely to take a stand against the Jalan Kalrock consortium in court. That and more when we return. Well, here's another CNBC-TV18 exclusive. The revival of Jet Airways has hit more turbulence. Sources say lenders are likely to take a stand against the Jalan Kalrock consortium in court, saying the conditions for the takeover have not been met. Remember, CNBC-TV18 reported last week that the consortium is yet to make any payments to lenders to assume control of the airline. Ritu Singh joins us now with more details. Ritu, so what exactly are the lenders worried about?
Well, the impasse between the Jalan Kalrock consortium and the lenders of Jet Airways is growing by the day. And in the latest development, we've been given to understand that the Jalan consortium recently moved the NCLT, seeking to take control of the airline, claiming that it has met all the conditions precedent required for the takeover. However, we've been given to understand from our banking sources that lenders will contest this claim in court, and they believe the conditions have not been met, which included securing slots, international traffic rights, which alone requires the consortium to have at least 20 aircrafts to be able to fly internationally, a condition that they have not yet met. The court has given the lenders time to file their reply, and the next hearing in the matter is the 29th of November, the date to watch out for. In other developments, the monetization plan for Jet Airways, which includes selling off about 11 of its owned aircrafts to raise some money, that has also been put on hold, given these differences that have now cropped up between the consortium and the lenders. Lenders are also wary of the ongoing investigation reports against Florian Frisch in Europe. However, we understand they've not officially sought a response from the consortium on the matter, but they do remain concerned about it. And lastly, on the matter of the PF and gratuity dues payment, which the NCLAT had directed the consortium to pay to employees about 250-odd crore rupees, that we understand the consortium has clearly told the lenders it will not pay any additional sum of money, and it has to come from whatever has already been allotted. And that is the response they gave to us in their reply to the CNBC-TV18 query, where they said they're ready to take over the company. They met all the conditions, already transferred 150 crores to the lenders, and there is no delay on their end. And as far as the PF gratuity due matter is concerned, they've already made it clear that no additional money will be given out.
Ritu, appreciate you joining us. So the lenders there to Jet Airways making it clear that they are not currently satisfied with the Jalan Kalrock consortium having fulfilled the conditions for a takeover. Now, as reported by CNBC-TV18 earlier, one of the key flashpoints between the lenders and the consortium was the payment of PF and gratuity to all eligible employees until the commencement of insolvency. There's been a standoff over who will make these payments, something that Ritu was alluding to as well. Madhiya Majawar has been reporting on that deadlock. Madhiya, lenders clearly losing their patience, as we just heard.
Well, it clearly looks like lenders are not keen on holding any further. As you rightly mentioned, payment of PF and gratuity has been one of the flashpoints between the consortium and the lenders. Let's look at how it started. In October, the NCLAT directed the consortium to make the gratuity payments to all eligible employees until the commencement of insolvency, that is June 2019. According to the calculation of my sources, this amount comes to over 200 crore rupees. The consortium had earlier told CNBC-TV18 that its payment towards all creditors is capped at 475 crore rupees. Now, in an application filed with the NCLAT on the 15th of November, the consortium has stated that if the court is expecting the consortium to make these additional payments, then they should be first made from the positive cash balance of Jet Airways and then from the 475 crores that it has reserved for various creditors. The positive cash balance of Jet that the JKC is referring to was estimated at 225 crore rupees in January, when it had sought NCLT's permission to use that money. Whether the NCLT will allow using this money to pay statutory dues is not clear as yet. Meanwhile, lenders have already taken a 95% haircut on their loans, so it was unlikely that they would agree to pay these PF and gratuity dues from the few hundred crores that they are yet to receive.
Madhya, many thanks for joining us. And there is more news from the aviation space. The Indian aviation sector has scored well in a safety audit conducted by the United Nations body, International Civil Aviation Organization. Danish joins us now to take us through the highlights of the audit. Danish.
Well, in a good news for the Indian aviation sector, all Indian airlines have performed really well in the recently conducted audit by the International Civil Aviation Organization. Well, as per sources, this is India's best performance till date, and the airlines were audited on various parameters like licensing, operations, airworthiness, legislation, organization, personnel and aerodromes. So after doing a thorough audit which began on 9th of November and it was concluded today, the sources have confirmed to CNBC-TV18 that this is India's best performance till date, and the sources further confirmed to us that the final report from ICAO is awaited, and once that report comes out, things will be more concrete for the entire aviation sector of the country. But all in all, if we see, this is a very positive news for the Indian aviation sector, and the Indian airlines have performed really well if we compare it from the previous few audits until now. This is the country's best performance ever.
Danish, many thanks for joining us. That is the latest as far as the safety audit of the Indian aviation space is concerned. That's it then on this edition of Business 360. Don't go anywhere. We continue with the news right here on CNBC-TV18.